Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. There's even a brand new Brigadier General tier where you can get a shout out on a Commander's Quarters episode that's dedicated to you. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show.
Innistrad Crimson Vow spoiler season continues on.
Yeah, I'm trying some weird things with these opens. Yeah, my apologies. Anyways, Cultivator Colossus. Make sure you check that episode out. This thing is absolutely broken. I mean, it's a green mythic. What else is new? Also, make sure you check out my earliest episode from today, which was very, very early this morning, so maybe that explains my strange intro, and I'm just a bit loopy from the lack of sleep. But regardless, Blood Vial Purveyor, he wants to give you blood. Yeah. Also, make sure you check out our brand new Flip Commander with Henrika Domnathi, which flips into Henrika Infernal Seer. So, yeah, with this, you will flip. Get it? But don't go check out those episodes yet. Make sure you stick around for this one first, obviously, because that's why you clicked on it. Hopefully that's the reason you clicked on it. Anyways, on this episode, I'm going to talk about Glorious Sunrise, yet another green card that does absolutely everything. Because if you're in green, you get to do everything. So what exactly is everything? And what does this card do? Well, let's jump into it to find out. So, Glorious Sunrise, and my apologies for the slightly grainy image, this was the best one that I could find, but regardless, Glorious Sunrise is an enchantment for 3 green. It says at the beginning of combat on your turn, choose one. There's a lot of options. Here we go. Creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain trample until end of turn. Target land gains tap, add green until end of turn. Draw a card if you control a creature with power 3 or greater, or you gain 3 life. So, first off, no, this card is not overpowered. I'm not complaining that it is overpowered. It is a 5-mana enchantment that gives you good value. It's a very flexible card that can just, again, basically do essentially whatever you want it to do on combat. Or again, I should say, with that combat trigger. I think Eddie actually summarized this the best when we were talking about this card. It's essentially the jack of all trades, but the master of none. I mean, just going through the options, okay, the first one, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain trample till end of turn. That's obviously a fantastic way to get extra damage in, and a fantastic way, of course, to finish your opponents off by pumping your team, and then also giving them trample to help get damage through. The second choice, target land gains tap, add green until end of turn, is just basically temporary ramp for the turn, giving you an additional 2 mana. Again, because most lands out there, although I guess if you're in green, you've got other ways to make your lands tap for even more, tend to tap for just 1. So getting a land taps for 3 obviously is 2 more. So yeah, temporary ramp. Also keep in mind that since you are in green, also you might have some ways to actually untap that land to take advantage of it, now tapping for green until end of turn. So yeah, now you can get even more value out of that land if your deck is built around that. Your third option, draw a card if you control a creature with power 3 or greater. Yeah, again, green apparently gets card advantage as well because, yep, I mean, there's a slight requirement there, right? You know, having a creature with power 3 or greater. Again, if you're in a green deck, you're pretty much guaranteed to have that met, essentially. So yeah, if you need card advantage, this is now card advantage for you too as well. And finally, last and certainly least, you can gain 3 life, because life gain, yay! But in all seriousness, if you've got some life gain synergies, yeah, that can be helpful as a continuous source of life gain if you need it. Regardless, the point is that with this card, again, it's the Jack of all trades, Master of none, you have options. Depending on the situation that you're in, it can help as a finisher, it can help as temporary ramp, it can help as card advantage, it can help as sustainment, like whatever you want to call life gain. Preservation? Staying alive? I don't know. Regardless. Now, obviously, since this is a combat trigger, also if you are in, say, a Gruul deck where you've got access to getting some extra combat spells and, you know, you get an extra combat, you can get a second choice on this, essentially. Now, I'm not saying you should build around that, but I'm saying that that is something to consider if you're in a deck that has extra combats that utilizes green. That being said, 5 mana is a bit much for just one of these effects on each turn. Again, if literally you didn't have a choice and just had one of these, this card would not be playable. The fact that it is flexible, of course, is very nice, and that's the draw to the card. But if you've already got other enchantments in your deck that kind of do those other pieces more effectively, you're probably going to stick with those for the most part. Again, unless you have an enchantment deck that, well, just wants to throw a bunch of enchantments into the deck, and this can actually help out in that kind of a deck, giving you that flexibility while also just helping by being an enchantment. That being said, yeah, I mean, if we break this card down to its pieces, the first part is kind of like Primal Rage plus Gaia's Anthem, which are much more cost efficient. Primal Rage being a 2-mana enchantment that gives creatures you control trample, and Gaia's Anthem being an anthem for 3 mana that gives your creatures +1/+1. Now, obviously, I guess technically, if you put both of them together, that would equal the first part, so that wouldn't be nearly as efficient across 2 cards, but if you either need the pump effect, maybe you've got a token deck and you want that creatures you control get +1/+1, obviously Gaia's Anthem could be more impactful. And again, if you need that trample effect by, having a bunch of big creatures, Primal Rage can help you out there too. And actually, that card's decently expensive for, just being, a 2-mana uncommon. Please reprint it. Regardless, of course, there are enchantments that basically give you extra mana in a turn, like Overgrowth. Basically, you attach to a land, and then it adds an additional green whenever it's tapped. Or one of my personal favorites, Frontier Siege. It has basically, when it enters the battlefield, you're going to choose cons, and at the beginning of each of your main phases, you add green your mana pool, so essentially every single turn, you get a free 4 green mana to utilize. Across the 2 main phases. You don't get it all at once, okay? When it comes to card draw, though, green has been getting more and more things lately. And yeah, you've got plenty of options when it comes to drawing cards based off of creatures and their power, etc., etc. Cards like Colossal Majesty, Elemental Bond, and Garruk's Uprising are just some examples. Colossal Majesty is also a time trigger, but this one's going to be on your upkeep. If you control a creature with power 4 or greater, which again isn't hard for a green deck, you draw a card. And then Elemental Bond isn't a time trigger, but a trigger based on a creature coming into play with power 3 or greater. You're going to draw a card, so yeah, this one's got a little more potential than that. And then Garruk's Uprising, well, just does a ton of things. First up, when it enters the battlefield, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, you draw a card, so this thing can essentially just cantrip if you meet that requirement. It also says creatures you control have trample, so yeah, just Primal Rage stapled onto this, and then whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card, so a slightly, worse Elemental Bond, but again, typically, in green decks, you're going to have creatures coming in that have power 4 or 5 or 6 or whatnot, so you're going to meet that. And finally, I guess, there really aren't too many green enchantments, at least that I could find, that just straight up just give you 3 life without some sort of a condition. Like Leyline of Vitality has whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may gain 1 life, and Retreat to Kazandu gains you 2 life whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, if you choose that one. But yeah, again, life gain is the least of these effects, and the least one that I'm worried about kind of giving a direct comparison to. And speaking of comparisons, just a quick heads up, I get on my soapbox here for just about a minute, maybe a minute and a half, so if you want to skip past that, go ahead, okay? And speaking of comparisons, Eddie and I were actually joking that if there was a white version of this card, let's say it was a cycle, what would this card look like? Well, it would look like this card, Mediocre. So, okay, I actually misspelled, which actually, you know what? That's fine. That is on brand for Mono White. Mediocre Sun's Rise. It's not even spelled right. It would be an enchantment that costs 4 white because, it's got to cost more than the green one. It says at the beginning of combat on your turn, choose one that hasn't been chosen. You can, you've got plenty of options. You can gain 3 life. You can gain 2 life. You can gain 1 life, or you can lose the game. Isn't that wonderful? Because, yeah, whereas green gets a ton of options, Mono White essentially just does, well, the same thing. Okay, fine, one of those options should have been put a +1 counter on a creature you control, but still, come on. It's absolutely no secret that green essentially can do everything, and Mono White has been pigeonholed to, well, not do nearly as much. And obviously, card advantage is pretty much the biggest problem that Mono White has, and it doesn't really have any ways to do it, at least none that Wizards is really giving it to be, efficient, whereas every other color essentially has a way to do it. With green, it's essentially creature-based, right? You can draw based on the number of creatures you have, or, draw based on power, etc., etc. When it comes to red, it's temporary card advantage, by getting that impulse draws off the top. When it comes to black, it's okay, you get to draw a card, but you're going to lose a life, which again is okay in Commander. And when it comes to blue, it's just straight up, yep, draw cards because blue. But with white, it's like you have to jump through 85 hoops and then maybe you can draw a card, or, you just get this mediocre enchantment that lets you either gain life or lose the game because Mono White. Okay, soapbox over. Thank you for bearing with me. Let's continue. As I mentioned before, I think Glorious Sunrise, again like Eddie mentioned, is more of a jack of all trades and a master of none, so unless you're really playing an enchantment-heavy deck that's just like, hey, another enchantment that does things, then I'm not sure it's going to have a place in your deck. But yeah, hey, Sithis, Harvest Hand, as an Enchantress commander that's like, hey, enchantments that do things. So yeah, it could find a spot in that deck. Speaking of which, there's Vasa the Sunlit. Again, hey, I'm an Enchantress. This time only drawing one card for the first enchantment spell each turn, but still also grows based on your number of enchantments. And yeah, giving Vasa to +1/+1 and trample can definitely be deadly in certain situations, again, if you're going with a Voltron-style deck. And then Esther the Mask also might want to consider this as well, again, an enchantment-style commander that, well, actually this one can untap an enchant permanent and can also enchant permanents, so by enchanting a land that you then allow to tap for green, 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 you could untap it for even more mana, so yeah, there is that synergy there. Regardless, again, Glorious Sunrise is just essentially just proof on a card that green can do essentially whatever it wants. I mean, I'm just pretty thankful that this card also didn't say at the bottom, you know, hey, there's a fifth option. Return target card from your graveyard to your hand because regrowth, because green can do that too. Or maybe a sixth option with, hey, you know, target creature you control fights another target creature because green can also get rid of creatures. And also enchantments and artifacts and everything. Green can do everything. That's the entire point of this episode. Wizards. Mono white needs some support. Okay, I don't mean some. A lot of support. Soapbox over. And with that, this show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are. And as always, thanks again and have a good one.